Hello again, everybody. This is Mr. Everything, and I am coming back at you with another Wargaming and miniature video. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made my French Normandy Bocage for my 15mm World War II project. Alright, now we started off by taking some XPS foam, half-inch, and then I cut it down to about 15mm to 3/4 of an inch, 20mm, and then I glued it onto popsicle sticks. I went through and cut these popsicle sticks to size. So some of them are 6 inches, some of them are 4 or 3 or 2 inches. So basically I just measured out my map and cut my popsicle sticks to the size that I wanted the bocage to be. And then I glued the styrofoam onto those sticks. And now I'm taking my hot wire and I am cutting around the foam, making it rounded on the end just like the popsicle stick. But also I'm cutting out the sharp edges to give it a slope from the popsicle stick up to the top of the bocage. And then I'm also gonna do a little bit of a rounding and sometimes even cut a little bit off of the top of the bocage just to give it an uneven appearance. I don't like it to be perfectly flat on the top, so we just do a little bit of, like I'm doing right here, just going up and down, wiggling the wire foam cutter. And then I'll set that one off to the side and we'll do another one. This one's a little bit longer. Again, I start off by rounding the ends off. That way, when you have multiple bocage on the table, you can either put them end to end, you can butt them up against each other, or if you need it to turn around a corner or 90 degrees, the rounded ends make those turns look less obnoxious. So the bottom end of the wire is rubbing against the popsicle stick, and then the top is basically just randomly making a top. I'm kind of over exaggerating my cut there just so you can see. And then again, I'll go ahead and I will cut the top so that it's not perfectly smooth. But I also cut the top so that there will be a flatter area on the top so that I can place foliage and bushes. If you miss a spot or if you feel like you need to go back in and cut something else off, feel free to do that. Okay, I need to do about 30 of these, so when I get all of them cut out, I'll be back. And here you go. Right now I'm just counting them because I wanted to see if I was going to have enough clump foliage and tufts to put on them, and it looks like there won't be a problem. I'll be able to do that. The 3 in the bottom right hand corner, those 3 right there I just touched, have a section in the middle of them cut out to represent a breached bocage. So if a tank that has a cutter breaks through, or if your engineers use demolition charges or what have you to make a path through the bocage, that's what they would represent. I would probably not place them on the table initially. I would place them after they were breached. So they would basically be replacement bocage. And if you notice, I did not put them directly centered. The hole, I put it a little bit off to either side, so that depending on which way I turn the bocage, when I replace it, it could be either more to the left or more to the right. Alright, now we're going to seal this styrofoam with a mixture of paint and Mod Podge. The Mod Podge will give it a resin sealant, and the paint will give it a color. And as you see here, I've got a Mod Podge and grass green mixture. I would have preferred to use a black or a brown base coat because it would look better under the next step that I'm going to do, which is a dirt paste. But because I had the green already ready for when I was doing the size of my tiles, I decided just to go ahead and, instead of wasting the Mod Podge and green that I had already mixed, to go ahead and use it. It doesn't really matter that much because I'm going to be completely covering these bocage with these texture pastes that you see on the screen, and yeah, so the green's not really gonna shine through. That's why I didn't really have that much of a problem with it. Now I have a box with some wax paper to catch any of the drippage. Now I have light earth that I plan to use on one of the pathways, but also on the dark brown, just to make it look stony. But I have dark earth, middle earth, and muddy ground. When I say middle, I mean medium brown, actually. Yeah, so because the dark earth and the muddy ground dry almost exactly the same color from AK, I just decided to go ahead and use the muddy ground to use it up. I'm going to use the dark earth primarily around the bottom portions of the bocage, and I'm going to use the medium brown along the top portions of the bocage. And you can see me applying the muddy ground along the sides of the bocage, leaving the top exposed. In this case, I'm also leaving the pathway exposed because I'm going to use the medium brown or the light earth on that. And as you can see, it's completely covering all the way down past the popsicle stick. I use this texture paste also to kind of fill in any imperfections that might be on the styrofoam, because when you use the hot wire cutter, you might make a mistake or cut too deep in one spot or make something that doesn't look right. And what I use now is I cover it with this paste, and it'll fill in all those holes. Plus, the part where it glues to the popsicle stick, sometimes it looks like the popsicle stick is wider than the styrofoam, or it, like right here, you can see that the popsicle stick is wider than the styrofoam. So I apply the paste along there as well, because it'll disguise it'll make it more of a gentle transition. And after doing a few of them, I wanted to show you that not all of them I leave blank along the top. Some of them I'm actually taking the muddy ground and going from the bottom all the way over the top, giving it 100% coated, because there's a few different looks that we're going to be going for, and one of them is with the muddy ground covering the entire bocage. Now, taking the medium brown, I'm going to apply that on a couple of the trails, but also along more than half of the tops of these bocage. And again, with the muddy ground not covering 100%, the medium brown will have to go up to the edge of it. And we are continuing to cover the green, disguising it, covering it. This texture paste from either Vallejo or AK, both of them dry pretty solid, very rock hard, so it will provide an additional layer of sturdiness or protection for the styrofoam as well. You're not putting a lot of weight on the styrofoam. You're not you shouldn't be crushing the styrofoam or anything like that, so it will be well protected. Alright, so I'm going to do 2 of these cut paths, and I'm going to do about half of the bocage tops in this medium earth. Alright, so let me go ahead and grab another one, and we'll just go ahead and cover the top. You should get a variety of different colors. So you're going to have medium earth on the top of some of them. You're going to have a light earth on the top of some of them. You're going to have a combination of dark and light earth on some of them. So there's basically just a variety, and I would recommend you experimenting first with maybe 1 or 2 bocage and a variety of different shades and colors and how you like it, because whatever flock you use might or might not cover 100%. You can probably see the texture underneath, and the way I flock, I don't flock 100% anyway. I try to flock about 75%, so you would see a lot of the texture underneath. So it's just basically whatever color palette that you like. Okay, so let me go ahead and finish these up, and then we'll be right back. All right, we're back. I am taking some of the solid dark earth, and I am applying a little bit of this light earth texture on it, kind of at a randomness, just along edges and raised areas, almost like dry brushing, but not. I'm basically just using my brush, and I'm just spattering it on there. So I'm just pushing it various places, just putting it on random, because what that looks like in the final product is basically like a very rocky bocage without me having to put rocks on there. All right, let me do these and I'll be right back. All right, now once everything is dry, I'm going to start using this Knock field grass. It's a field, what do they call it? Flowery field or flowery meadow, I think is what they call it. So the static grass that's in this concoction is from their Meadow line of static grass, but there's also some wood chips in there that are yellow and red that give you the impression that there are flowers, or it's a mix, which I really enjoy. I think it gives the bocage kind of a wild appearance. If you want, you can use a solid green. You can use whatever flock matches your table. You can use whatever you want. Obviously, it's your bocage. But I prefer to make it kind of a wild look. I tried some earlier bocage I made. I used some really long static grass, 4 millimeters or larger, because I wanted the grass look on the bocage to look wild, but it didn't. It just looked out of scale. It didn't make it look wild, it just made it look out of scale. So I've decided to scale it back to this 2.5 millimeter static grass wildflower combination, and it comes out really well. I'm very pleased with it. Now you can see I'm putting probably about 90% glue on there. You can put as much or as little glue as you want. That's really a personal preference. I use Elmer's glue, watered down about 50-50, so that it goes on pretty smooth and gets about double the coverage. And then when it dries, some of the static grass will actually fall off and you'll be able to see through the static grass. All right, so now this is them completed. Now some of these you see are solid brown. Some of them have the medium brown on the top, and some of them have the rocky look to them. So this is a mixture of the different styles, and that's good because I don't like all my bocage to look like mirror images of each other. I want them to be unique, and I'll put different ones on different areas of the battlefield. All right, now that you've seen this, let's move on to putting on trees. And then after the trees, we'll be putting on tufts. And then after the tufts, we'll be putting on clump foliage. All right, so let's go ahead and bring that out. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to put some trees on. I have some fairly large trees. These are about 2.5 inches tall. Well, the tree branches are about 2.5 inches tall. The trunk is longer than that, of course. But I also have some pine trees. I have some small trees. I have some large trees. I even have some rounded trees, various different manufacturers. And then I've got some tufts here from Knock and from Parthen. Parthen is the second one. One of these is like a dark green, and then the other one is a field flowers. The Parthen one is a very dark green. It was pretty inexpensive. I got each of those for about $5. They come with 28 in them. I've only done just over 28 bocage here in my boxes, maybe closer to 30-35. And this is the clump foliage. You can see that there is an OD green, and there is I have what's called a medium green. I found that, and I also have what's called bushes. One of them is called, two of them are called underbrush, and then one is called bushes. The underbrush are cut a little bit more fine, and that's what I wind up using. The bushes I don't wind up using. I'll be using them somewhere else in my project. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me move all this out of the way. All right, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these trees. I have about 24 of these large trees here. They came like this in a bag. They come with a pin on the bottom to stick into your terrain feature, and then you'd have this tall tree, which is great for like if you were doing a forest. But what I'm doing is putting them on the top of my bocage. So what I do is I cut the pin off, but I also cut off about 1/3 of the trunk. And if you noticed, I cut at an angle to make a sharp point. And then what I'll do is I'll take that tree trunk and I will poke it down into the styrofoam on the top, using my needle nose to grip the trunk to give me a little bit more control and pressure, and then I will jam it into the styrofoam. And it is a little hard to get it to stick inside there because of either the Mod Podge and the paint and also the texture paste. But with a little pressure you can get it poked in. And then I put a drop of Elmer's to seal the deal. And then when I put the tree back in the hole, the Elmer's should hold it firmly in place. And that way it doesn't fall out or wiggle around. It'll grip to the styrofoam inside the hole. And there you go. And you got a tree sticking up out of the top of your bocage. Now I have less of these trees than I have bocage. So my plan is to do 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 of these large trees per bocage strip, and I will also do it in random gaps. Like some of them I'll put right next to each other, some of them I'll put far apart, sometimes I'll put 2 on the far left side, sometimes I'll put 1 on each end. Basically I'm just doing it random. I don't want any 2 bocage to look the same, but I'm not what's the question? What's the answer here? I'm not looking at my other bocage to make a comparison of where I stick it. I'm just not even paying attention. I'm just thinking how I want to stick it. All right, so let me go ahead and jam this guy in. Now, if you just stick, most of these trees that you get have like a wire down the main trunk to give it some kind of rigidity, and then it branches out to the various branches. If you don't use the needle nose, right, if you just push down on it from the top, there is a chance that you will bend your tree trunk, because I learned that firsthand. I did that on one of the ones I did. I decided, why do I need needle nose? I'm just going to jam it in with my hand. And of course, I bent the tree trunk. So this just makes it more secure, have a little bit more control over it. Okay, so let me go ahead and do a bunch of these trees on a bunch of these tree trunks, and then we'll go on to another type of tree. All right, so now what I'm doing is I'm using some of my smaller trees. These are trees that I got online. You can find quite a bit of trees on online stores like Hobby Link, but I got these on Amazon actually. And I think I got something like 48 trees for $10. And they come in a variety of different lengths and colors. And so what I did there was I just decided to go ahead and poke all the holes first, and then put the glue on, and then I can just go in and randomly put these trees in. I'm trying to put a couple of tall ones in, and then I'll grab maybe a smaller one, and then a couple more taller ones, or whatever my heart desires. And you notice I put like 3 on one end and then 1 on the other end. That was just completely random. And I'm just looking at it to see how it looks. All right, moving on to another one, and we'll move on to the next type of tree. Alright, now these are the last 3 of this type of tree. I made some other bocage using these trees. They all have a different feel to them. Either they use different flocks or different armatures, different colors, and so I wanted to put all 3 of these on the same bocage so that it would look like it was natural. If you mix the trees up too much, then it looks a little out of place or random. So, which it is already random, but I don't want it. But I want it to look naturally random. And these trees are probably some of my favorite trees. They're smaller trees, but they're also big enough to be like, I don't know, like a 10-foot tree or something. Okay, so we got that in, and we'll move on to the next type of tree. Alright, now these look like deciduous trees, less pine, more deciduous. You can see the bocage I pulled out right there is one of my rocky ones, so it was solid brown with a little bit of the white, or I should say light earth kind of scattered about, and it does make it look kind of rocky. Alright, now I'm just poking holes right now and trying to decide where I want to put these trees. It's pretty self-explanatory that all the trees are pretty much done the same way. You poke holes, you put glue, and then you stick your trees down inside. Now these trees come as either dark green or OD green, and they come as large or small, so I kind of alternate colors or sizes as I put them in there, just to make it look a little more random. Alright, moving on to the next one. Alright, now in this group here, you can see that I have some pine trees in there as well. And those pine trees came from Heike. I had a box of 100 pine trees. Now we're using the knock clump foliage. And you can see that on some of these, I already have some flowers, but I also have some of the dark green. Right, and here's some dark green, and you can see I've only used about half of my package. Now on these, what I do is I'll put some Elmers in my palette, and then what I'll do is I'll take the clump foliage piece and I will dip it into the Elmers in my palette, covering the bottom, because the knock not clump foliage, the knock tufts, they are not self-adhesive, so you have to glue them down. So I just basically cover the bottom with Elmers. I find a location on the bocage and I'll put one of these on there. I tried to put one flowery tuft on every bocage strip because it gives it a striking contrast in color. I mean, it really stands out compared to the other tufts. I put some. Now, if you look, you can barely see. Okay, now this is like a Chinese-made tuft. I've already used one of the packages on these tufts, the dark green ones, but you can see it sheds quite a bit. And that's the OD green from Knock. Now, and then there's the flowery ones. The OD green ones are already placed, and you can see, I'll point out a few of the OD green ones, but they are almost invisible. Like there's the flowers, right? Because they really stand out. But then the OD green ones are out there as well. And I tried to put 1 or 2 OD green ones per strip. Mainly just, and there's one OD green there, and then there's one right there. You can barely see how they transition, but they do add just enough contrast to make them worthwhile. Also, the tufts stand up, making kind of an artificial hedge on the top of the bocage. Now I've also already used a full package of these Chinese tufts from Parthen, and about half of the flock, or I should say the flowery portion of the flock, falls off. Okay, so we're going to put some more of these flowery tufts, because there are a few of my bocage that don't have any flowers on them. So I just pull a bunch out because I'm trying to figure out how many I need to complete the strips that I have. Once I get them all covered, I'll be right back. Okay, and now we're going to start putting on these dark green tufts, and they're basically done the exact same way. Now this one has 4 pine trees all the way across. There's no real room to put any tufts. I didn't bother. The trees go all the way down to the top of the bocage, but these tufts are also non-self-adhesive. And so I always put a little bit of glue on the bottom so that I could stick them in place. Just as a word of warning, even if it was self-adhesive, I still put a little bit of white glue on the bottom anyway, because I want to make sure it stays where I put it. Now in the packaging and also on the cutting mat, you can see a lot of the flowers, or a lot of the foliage from the tufts are actually coming off the tufts. And I'll show you how much comes off later, because I collect it, and I might be able to use it later as ground scatter, maybe in a forest or something like that, because it looks like it would work out really well. Okay, so now because I have so many of these tufts, and they're very inexpensive, I decided to use every single one of my Parthen dark green tufts. So I put 2, or like I scatter them around. I put at least 2 on every bocage strip. And you can see just from this picture alone that the bocage strips are in various lengths. The main length is 6 inches, because that's the length of my popsicle sticks. But I cut some of the popsicle sticks down to get various lengths, like 1, 2, 3, 4 inch, 5 inch strips. So I've got a variety. All right, let's move on to the next step. All right, right here I'm collecting up the extra flock that has fallen off the tufts, and you can see there's quite a bit of flock there, and I plan to use that in other areas. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this flock and I'm going to store it and save it, and maybe use it somewhere else. All right, so these basically have all the tufts on them, and the next step is going to be to put the clump foliage on them, but I want to let them dry, and see there's some others finished in a box there. But when they're dry, we'll come back and do the clump foliage. All right, they are dry. So now what I do is I'm going to apply a little bit of glue onto the top of the bocage, and then I'm going to press some clump foliage down into that glue. And I have both colors here. I've got the OD and the light green. There is a little bit of contrast, but I do use about half and half, but you could get away with just using one or the other. Okay, now this is the final step to making the bocage, but it is the most tedious, because you're putting little pieces of clump foliage, and what I'm trying to do, my thought process is I'm filling the gap between the trees and the tufts. So if there is a space between a tree and a tuft, or a tuft and a tuft, or a tree and a tree, I'll put clump foliage on the top of the bocage along that top ridge. Now, some of these bocage, the popsicle stick actually is bigger, like on that one that I just laid down. The popsicle stick is wider than the styrofoam, so there tends to be this little base that you can visualize on the bottom of the stick, where the foam and the stick meet. I tried disguising that a little bit with the Mod Podge. I tried disguising that a little bit with the texture paste and then the flock as well, but you can still see a little bit of that ledge. So what I wind up doing is disguising that even further with more clump foliage. So I put some clump foliage on the side. I put some clump foliage along the bottom ridge, or the bottom, the bottom edge where the popsicle stick and the styrofoam meet, to disguise those areas. All right, so now in this process right here, what I'm doing is I'm taking clump foliage with my tweezers, I'm dunking it into the Elmers, and then I am moving it over and sticking it on to the bocage. But I found that it's better just to apply the Elmer's glue directly to the bocage, and then using your fingers just moving the clump foliage over and pressing it in. No need to use tweezers, and no need to put it into your glue palette, because what I found was the glue in the palette started to get foam from the clump foliage build up, and it started to soak it up like a sponge, because that's basically what it is, it's a sponge, and ruining the palette. Well, not ruining it, but clogging it up. All right, so I've done one color, so now I'm going to switch over and do a different color. Okay, and now that they're all dry, I put them out on my table here, and I put some figures down. These are 15mm miniatures, and I want you just to take a look at the various bocage pieces, how they go together, how they meet, butt up against in the corners, how you can turn corners with them. You can make gaps in between the bocage if you want. I put a couple of tanks down just so you can just see like what kind of line of sight, and there's a path there. There's some more infantry. There's some unfinished fields that I have put out there, some buildings, just so you can see how the bocage holds up against the rest of the terrain. All right, so and there's an M5 Stuart. But yeah, just take your time, take a look. Tell me what you think, if you like it, if you plan to make some of these on your own. If you do it differently, let me know. But I think this bocage looks really good. This is not the placement of the bocage for this scenario that I'm planning on doing, but I just wanted to put all the bocage on the 2x4 area so that you could see how much about 30 pieces could cover. And it was super easy to make, and I made all of that in one day. So yeah, it's just take one day, make a bunch of bocage, and then you'll be ready for all of your D-Day and Normandy hedgerow country battlefields. All right, guys, thanks for coming out and watching this video. I appreciate it. Like and subscribe to the channel, and I will be doing multiple updates on my World War II project.